Don't get him going.
I know. Your husband's he's very passionate. Okay, we are recording. It started, and I'm going to get a chumash.
Don't get him going.
I know. Your husband's very. Oh, why do I hear myself? Hold on. Okay, it's good. Okay, we're gonna go live on Facebook. Okay, and we're gonna get started in 1 minute.
Tree here. It's all. This tree here. Was always like that.
The what?
This tree. All the branches are gone.
She was told the
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hagai and Margot, I'm going to mute you. There you go. We are live on YouTube and live on Facebook. I'm going to share this and on Zoom, and I'm going to share this in 2 other Facebook pages as other people come into class. Good to know that you're here, Randy. Good to see you. Philip, Marjorie, Jan, good to see you. We're going to mute everyone. Stay muted. Oh, Jim is coming on. Good evening, Jane. Good evening, Pancho. I'm going to share this, and we're going to get rolling. We have a fascinating topic to discuss tonight. I just need to share it on 2 more of the Facebook pages, and we will be set. Good evening from Australia. Oh, it's morning, I guess. Good morning from Australia. I feel like I'm in Australia. Everyone, please mute yourselves. Good evening, Kayla Gittel. Good to see you. Hold on. You need to mute yourself. Yeah, thank you. Okay, here we go. That's shared. Very good. Hashem knew that this class had to happen, which is why, despite the delays and despite the 80 hours of travel, he knew that the plane needed to land in Bozeman just with enough time, literally, to drive home, get my book, and make it to the shul in time to give class so we can celebrate this beautiful parsha together. So I am glad that I'm here. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If you're wondering why I'm dressed in a different dress code, just so I could beat the question, I just got off my 80-hour trip to Israel. I left Sunday at 11 in the morning, 11:20 in the morning, and I'm back in Bozeman, and it's Wednesday evening. So 6 planes, only 2 big delays, and we managed to celebrate with hundreds of first cousins in Israel, and I'm glad that I went, and Emertz Hashem tonight, I'll be glad that I slept. Now we're going to get into our beautiful Torah portion of the book of Numbers, the book of Bamidbar, and we are in the portion of Pinchas. Now, at the end of last week's Torah portion, and I touched on it a little bit, and actually the topic of last week's class was about what happened with the Jewish men and Baal Peor, the terrible idol of Peor, where they would defecate on the idol and they were seduced by the Moabite women. And at the end of the parsha, it says, and I'm going to read, and you need to pay attention because I'm not going to repeat these words, but it's important words. It says that the Jews were becoming immoral with the Moabite women. And then it says, an Israelite man came and brought an important Midianite woman to his brothers and took her into a tent in full view of Moses and in full view of the entire congregation of the children of Israel. So hold on. So people you need to mute yourselves when you come into a class. Yeah, there you go. So one of the leaders of the Jewish people, and we'll talk about his name in a moment, defies one of the most basic principles of Jewish law, not only Jewish law, one of the most basic principles of the 7 Noahide laws that all of humanity is obligated to fulfill, which is the laws of adultery and the laws of promiscuity and the laws of sacred marriages. And he takes a Midianite, like a princess, a Midianite important woman, and he goes and cohabitates with her in public, in his tent, in front of Moses, in front of the Jewish people. And then Rashi tells us that Moses, was indecisive because he couldn't remember what the law was. What are you supposed to do in this case? And they were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. But there was one guy who did remember what the halacha was, what you're supposed to do. So it says, again, I'm reading from the end of last week's parsha. But Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron, the priest. So this is Aaron, Moses' brother's grandson. When Aaron passed away, last week's Torah portion, he gave over the reign of the priesthood, of the kahuna, to his son Elazar. Moses made the transition from Aaron to Elazar. Elazar had a son named Pinchas. And Pinchas remembered that when you see someone doing something so extreme, like cohabitating in public and defying such a central law in Judaism, you have to kill them. So he stood up from among the congregation and taking a spear in his hand, he went into their tent. He went into the tent after the Israelite man and pierced the spear through both of them. You got to give him credit for being original. They were cohabitating. They were having an inappropriate relationship. So instead of killing them each individually, he took a spear and went through both of them, the Israelite man and the woman, right through her lower abdomen. And because he killed them, the plague then ceased from the children of Israel. And after 24,000 Jewish people were killed in the plague, because of what Pinchas did, the plague stopped, which means God was happy with what he did. Now, again, I'm going to say this even though I really shouldn't have to, but this is not something you try at home. That's not what the Torah is saying. A, you're not Pinchas. B, we don't live in the days of the temple or the tabernacle. And C, we don't have the level of spirituality that we had back then to know that this is possible or not. So don't come to me later with questions or don't go around and say the rabbi said that if you see someone being inappropriate immorally that you should take a spear and kill them. This is recorded so the police department will know that the rabbi never said such a thing. All I said was that Pinchas did it and God was happy. Now we get to the beginning of our Torah portion, and it begins with the following words. God spoke to Moses, saying, Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, has turned my anger away from the children of Israel by zealously avenging me in their presence. So first and foremost, God tells Moshe that Pinchas has removed God's anger from the Jews by zealously avenging God in the presence of the Jewish people. And I did not destroy the children of Israel because of my zealous anger. So God says it's because of Pinchas that I didn't destroy the Jews. Therefore, God says to Moshe, say to him, to Pinchas, listen to these words. I am hereby giving him my covenant of peace. It will be an eternal covenant of priesthood for him and for his descendants after him because he was zealous for his God and atoned for the children of Israel. And the name of the Israelite man who was killed along with the Midianite woman, was Zimri, the son of Salu, the leader of Shimon's paternal house. And the name of the woman was Cosbi, the daughter of Tzur, a national leader of paternal house in Midian. So that's the end of the part of the story that we're going to talk about. So you have a leader from the tribe of Shimon. His name is Zimri. He cohabitates with a Gentile Midianite princess named Cosbi. They're both killed by Pinchas. And because he kills them, God says to Pinchas, you will now have, you will now have my covenant of peace. And for all eternity, your descendants will be considered members of the priesthood because they were zealous for God and atoned for the children of Israel. So suffice it to say, Pinchas not only gets an entire Torah portion named for him, he gets a lot of accolades from God for his behavior. I give him the covenant of peace. Then it says, Loi ulazare acharab, to him and to his descendants that come after him, because he was zealot, because he acted zealot with zealotry for God and brought atonement. But it seems kind of odd, and what I share from here on, up until this point, was the verses of the Torah. What I share from this point on is from the incredible teachings of the Rebbe. It seems odd because Pinchas was the only, the way you read the story, it seems like Pinchas is the only person that was able to remove God's anger from the Jewish people. Why is that problematic? Because if you study the Torah until you came to the portion of Pinchas not in Genesis, because Moshe wasn't alive in Genesis, but in Shmos, in the book of Exodus, in the book of Leviticus, and throughout the book of Numbers, we see that Moses not only once, but many times took away God's anger and his vengeance from the Jewish people. First of all, when the Jews sinned with the golden calf, in the book of Exodus, he literally goes to God and says, you need to forgive them or I'm out. When they complained in the third portion of Bamidbar, so 4 weeks ago, when they were complaining about something, I think it was the meat, when they said the manna wasn't good enough, they wanted to have meat, and God gave them the quail, the myriad of quail that blew in from the sea. How did God get calmed? Moses got God to calm down. When the spies brought the terrible news from Israel, 10 of the 12 spies just a few weeks ago, and caused God to keep the Jews for another 39 years in the desert, who's the one that that calmed God's wrath? Moshe. So Pinchas, right? There's no Torah portion in the whole Torah called Moshe. Moses. It's called the 5 books of Moses, but there's no actual Torah portion named for him. He doesn't get credit for the priesthood because he's not a founder of the priesthood. He doesn't get the covenant of peace, even though he brought calming and tranquility and inner peace for the Jewish people and God's forgiveness way more times than Pinchas. And somehow Pinchas, who shows up once with a spear and takes out 2 troublemakers, gets the covenant of peace. He gets to remove the plague. He gets it for him and generations that come after him. He gets, why? Furthermore, not only did Pinchas get the covenant of peace for the descendants that came after him, Moses wanted to have his torch of leadership be carried on to his descendants, to his children. And he said to God, Yirshu Banai es Kvoidi, may my children, may my sons inherit my honor, my leadership, my power, my influence. And God said, no, they're not deserving of it. So Moshe does everything and gets, as far as compared to Pinchas, he gets nothing. Pinchas shows up once and does an act of zealotry and gets all these incredible stuff. So where's the fairness here? It seems kind of odd, not only because of the general gift that they got that Pinchas got over Moses, but the fact that Moses was desperate for his children to get, and God wouldn't give it to him. We know nothing about Moses' sons. Their name was Gershom and Eliezer. We know that he had a grandson that later became an idolater. In the story of the statue of Micha, the statue of Micah in the book of the prophets. And Pinchas shows up like a vigilante, like in the Wild West with a spear, because he knows the information, so he takes justice in his own hand. Right? Imagine someone says, well, I read it in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, so here we go. Right? Pinchas says, I know the halacha. You, Moses, forgot the halacha. I'm busy. Boom. And he gets all these blessings. If I was Moses, I'd be pretty upset. Moshe's alive, by the way. Who is God telling to tell Pinchas that he gets the covenant of peace? God tells Moses to tell Pinchas that he's getting the covenant of peace because can you imagine Moshe? Like, hello, Mr. God or Mrs. God. God, what do you mean Pinchas? What am I, chopped liver? So the Rebbe goes on an incredible, insightful, deep explanation, differentiating between Moshe and Pinchas, which explains the differences that we see. It's true. Pinchas and Moshe both removed decrees, negative decrees and plagues that the Jewish people were sentenced with. But they did it in very, very different ways. What made Moses' way of removing plagues and punishment and Pinchas' way of removing plague and punishment so different? Says the Rebbe as follows. Moses operated in the realm of spirituality. In other words, when Moses saw there was a plague against the Jews, whether it was during the spies, during the sin of the golden calf, or was during the complaining, he knew that what he has to do is do something spiritual to counteract that. He needs to pray to God and beg God to forgive them and beseech God's mercy and the 13 attributes of God's mercy that came as a result. But it was a spiritual act. It was invoking spirituality so that God should respond and annul the decree. Pinchas, on the other hand, how did he remove God's vengeful anger? With something physical, a physical action. He changed the reality on the ground in the physical world by killing Pinchas and his girlfriend. I'm sorry, by killing, thank you, Seth, killing Zimri and his girlfriend. Pinchas kills them, but he does something physical. And by doing that physical act of killing Zimri and his girlfriend, Zimri and Cosby, he inspires, the Jewish people are freaked out. They're shell-shocked. So as we are taught, shock and awe, right? He did an act of shock and awe and resulted in the Jewish people doing tshuva, which resulted in the plague coming to an end. Sometimes tshuva is not a long process. The shock and awe just shocks you into a state of tshuva. It's like a defibrillator, right? If it works, it works. And so they were passed out spiritually, and he shocked them with the defibrillator by killing Zimri and Cosby. By the way, that's why if you look at the actual language in the verse about the zealotry of Pinchas, it says, "Bekanoi es kinasi b'soicham," that he acted in a way of being a zealot b'soicham amongst them. In other words, why did it pierce and permeate and penetrate the heart of the Jews? Because he did it right in their midst. It wasn't a story they were reading about. It wasn't an inspiration that came from heaven. They watched Pinchas arrive with a spear and take these people out. So it wasn't only shock and awe from a story. They watched it happen. It was in their midst, which is why it penetrated their hearts so quickly and so deeply. Moses prayed. Moses awakened spirituality, which is an incredible thing. But he didn't do something physical to end the plague. He didn't do something begashmius in the physical, materialistic world. Huh? Who told him to make the kappas neg?
No, but that's a physical, material thing.
Yeah, but it came from above. God told him to do it. The point is, everything that Moses did on his own was turning to God, saying, "God, what should I do? Okay, please, God, help the Jewish people." Pinchas didn't turn to God and say, "God, what should I do?" He took a spear and took him out. Now, if you look in their own lives, if you look at their form of selflessness, Pinchas versus Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, when it was time to step up for the Jews, he told God that he's willing to have his name erased from the Torah, that he wants his name erased from the Torah if God's not going to forgive the Jewish people. Meaning the sacrifice that Moses was ready to do for the Jews was also in the spiritual realm. Having his name erased from the Torah, which would be a spiritual decline. He's ready to give up the holy spirituality of having his name in the Torah, right? It would affect his soul. What did Pinchas do? Pinchas killed Cosby and Zimri. Was that a sacrifice of the soul or the body? Why? Because we're told, it says clearly in various medrashes, and actually in Sanhedrin, later we're going to learn in Sanhedrin, it says that that the members of Zimri's tribe, which is a tribe of Shimon, wanted to kill Pinchas. They actively wanted to kill him, and he was saved miraculously. So Pinchas is ready to sacrifice physically. The action he does to end the plague is physical by killing Zimri and Cosby. Moshe Rabbeinu Moses sacrifices spiritually, willing to have his name erased from the Torah, but he's not sacrificing his body. And when he seeks to remove the plague, it's by invoking God with prayer and beseeching God for mercy. It's not by doing something practically physical. So what really Moses and Pinchas represent are two different paths in the spiritual service of a Jew, of a human being, with God and how to interact with the world and sanctify the world. And I know those are big words, because when you look at the world these days, you wonder if there's room for sanctification, if there's room for inspiring the world, and the answer is yes. There is, not tikkun olam, I mean the real tikkun olam, transforming the world and sanctifying it. It's a beautiful thing. I met two Jews today on my flight, and they were both rushing and couldn't put on film, but there's a future there. Two different Jews that were heading to Salt Lake on the same flight. Neshama, they couldn't help themselves. One guy looked at me with a smirk and said, Chabad? He didn't even ask me what's my name. Chabad? Like I said, how did I give it away? I was wearing a baseball cap with jogging pants. I was comfortable on the long flight. Couldn't help it. He says, he says, you exude Chabad. And the other guy, after a few minutes of conversation, turns out he knows Chabad, etc. My point is that there's two different ways of sanctifying the world. There's the Pinchas way and the Moshe way. The way Moshe brought sanctification, holiness, spirituality to the world is by invoking on high and sort of pulling down incredible godly light from above to this world that would remove any interest in the physicality and materialism, right? That's why at the giving of the Torah, Moses stood at Sinai, right, giving the Torah, people were fainting. It was such a great light that people couldn't handle it. Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't elevating the world from bottoms up. He was inspiring the world from top to bottom. He was praying, he was bringing Torah, but it was all in the realm of spirituality by drawing light from above to below without a direct interaction with the physicality and materialism. Pinchas, on the other hand, represented us way more, because Pinchas went and dealt with the physical world. He recognized this, to truly sanctify the world, to truly make the world not just a Moshe world, a Mosaic world, a Moses world, but to make the world a Mashiach world, a world that's transformative, a world that's changed, a world that's sanctified. You need to work with the bottom and uplift it to on high. So Pinchas went straight for the physical. They're bringing unholiness, impurity, sin, evil by cohabitating publicly, inappropriately, immodestly. Public takes a spear in the physical world and kills them physically. And he sacrifices potentially his own physical life for that, because he could have gotten killed by the members of the tribe of Shimon. But he does that because Pinchas' worldview is that the way to truly transform the world is not drawing from above to below, but transforming the below that it becomes elevated to the above. That's one of the reasons, by the way, that it says in the Medrash that Pinchas Zeliyo, that Elijah the prophet that's going to herald in the coming of Mashiach, the famous Elijah went up to heaven in a chariot. Pinchas and Elijah were the same person. There's a big debate whether that means literally or the soul of, and I have a whole book at home from, actually, probably here. There's a book from Art Scroll, I believe, just about Eliyahu Hanavi, about Elijah. Of course, when I look for it, it's not going to pop up. It might be at home. But either way, there's a whole discussion there. But by the way, it's a great book about the life story of Elijah the prophet. But the reason why Pinchas and Eliyahu would be the same person is because Elijah also worked to transform and clarify the physical world, right? What do you mean by clarify? If you take a physical object, right, here's a set of keys. If I want to take these physical keys and reveal the holiness and spirituality within them by utilizing them for godliness and sanctifying them, it's a form of clarity, of clarifying, because I'm going to clear it. And you'll end up seeing through the physical and seeing the spiritual that exists beneath it or within it. That's what Pinchas did. That's what Elijah did. Moses wasn't that. Moses wanted to bring the light from above and power into the world with that light like a bombardment. And the challenge with that, it doesn't have longevity. It's not really permeating the physical world. It's bombarding the physical world. You know those?
The baby steps.
Well, the baby steps, if done right, eventually become much more internalized because you're actually doing the work, right? You can get those, what's the Ozempic that everyone's taking now? You know, the shots that everyone sticks in their stomach, diabetes shots that everyone's using to lose weight. No, Ozempic.
Oh, Ozempic.
Whatever. There's millions of people taking this thing. It's horrible. It's harmful. They're doing it because they want instant weight loss. I do too, by the way. But I'm not willing to do that when I know the reality that in 3 months from now or 6 months from now, not only will I gain the weight back, but I'll probably gain more. It's much harder to do what I'm doing, working out every week and watching what I'm eating, being careful what I put in my body, and stretching and doing things that are good for your health. It's much harder. But that's when things become internalized. That's how you make real change. The instant gratification changes don't last. Moshe Rabbeinu represented the epitome of Yiddishkeit, but he lived in an era when in order to transform the world, all he had to do at his point in his life was to draw down great holy lights of God into this world and sort of bombard the world with so much light. Like a blitz, a campaign blitz, a spiritual campaign blitz. And what happens? 2 days later, people forget about it. 2 hours later, people forget about it in today's short attention span. Right? If I asked you now to give me the slogan for John McCain's campaign in 2000, whenever he ran, 8, you wouldn't remember. I certainly won't remember. Obama's, I remember, yes, we can, because it was an easy one to remember. George Bush, John Kerry, Trump, Hillary, I have no clue. What's shot? Because it was a blitz. And it works short term. Long term, it doesn't make any change in anyone's life, and it doesn't stick with us. You know, it does stick with us, things that we work hard on and that we have to internalize, and it involves baby steps. And that's really what Pinchas represented. So in a sense, we're more relatable to Pinchas than we are to Moshe, because Pinchas is of the belief that the transformation has to happen from within in order for it to have eternity. And the proof's in the pudding, by the way, because Moshe, his sons didn't carry the torch of his leadership because it wasn't internalized. He wasn't bringing it about in an internalized way, so it didn't have longevity, didn't have continuity with his children. Pinchas worked the hard route. And because he worked the hard route, it did stick with his children. That was God's pledge, that you will have the covenant of peace and it will stick with you and your descendants. Because when you do the hard work, there's a much better chance that there's continuity. But if my grandfather or my father got inspired for 5 minutes by some, let's say he had a motivational speaker inspired him, right? It's not going to stick with his descendants. The descendants won't even know about it. But if the ones who came before us worked it hard, right? They worked it and they transformed themselves and they changed themselves and the children saw it, so they did the same, and then their grandchildren. Then there's continuity. Continuity doesn't come from fluff. Fluff doesn't give continuity. And even if you're Moshe Rabbeinu, even if you're Moses, the epitome of all leaders of all time, if you lack the internalization by transmitting it to the children that come after you, it will not have magical reality for the future. I davened with my father in Shul this week. Well, just the one morning I was in Israel, Tuesday morning, I went to Shul with him, which I'll write about in my Friday email. It was very special for me. But one thing I realized as my father was davening, it was almost freaky how many things he does while he davens, meaning ways he shakes or ways he moves or how he turns the pages and where he puts his talis, that I do. Some things I didn't even realize that they're directly from him. But I must have grown up with it, so it's automatically in my system. And now I'm watching him do it. I'm like, oh, wow, that's where I get it from. Mannerisms, simple things. But that's what you grew up with. And you see it time and time and time again, and it becomes part of who you are. That was Pinchas. And that's why there's eternity with Pinchas. Moshe Rabbeinu, on the other hand, the Torah is eternal, the Torah that Moshe taught us, but the specifics of how we transform the world is more, that's why he doesn't have the covenant of peace, bris kuhunas olam, and Pinchas does. So it's an incredible lesson that the Rebbe is teaching here based on this week's parsha, and the importance of doing the hard work. You know, the Talmud says, Adam roitze bekav shaloi mitisha kavin shel chaverei. A person would rather have one measure of whatever food or item they own, that they worked hard for on their own, than 9 measures that belong to someone else that they got as a freebie. There's something so beautiful, so special, so sacred, so cherished when we worked hard for something. When we figured out what the pshat, what the explanation is in the Maimer of Chassidus or in the page of Talmud. Not that it was done, not like Seth, for example, when we're learning and you go, well, maybe it means this, and then 3 seconds later we read it actually in the Gemara, which means your brain understood what the Talmudic sages, and look at that, and we always get that smile, like, oh, check it out. There's a certain satisfaction from the hard work, not from the freebie, not from the free lunch, not from the spiritual inspiration you get in a motivational speaker is gonna inspire you, and then 5 minutes later you ask the person, 5 minutes after they walk out, tell me so inspiring. Did you share something the person said? Not a clue. Because it wasn't internalized. I'm not saying there's no room ever to be inspired. Nothing wrong with inspiration. You know, you go on a plane, like I just did, the many planes, and you watch a documentary that's so emotional, and you get the point of it, right? Maybe you even shed a tear. You get emotional. Ask me after, except for the punchline. Ask me for the details of it. I won't remember anything. Documentary on the plane. It's not my life course. I was watching something that's inspirational. It was cool. It was nice. Details? I didn't internalize it. I wasn't studying it for a math or an exam. I was watching something. I was reading something. Internalization takes work. I've been reading a lot of Michal Ashman's book, the one that we gave out.
Sounded a lot like your dad.
Yeah. I was reading on the plane the book of Michal Ashman that we gave out on my 40th birthday a year and a half ago, the Green Book. What if I wasn't afraid? I skimmed through it once. Now I'm reading it really well. I think I'm going to read it again and again because it's so incredible. But that's the truth. If I want to internalize it, I have to read it again. And it's not going to happen by reading it once. It's such deep stuff. If I want to change the way I see the world, like this morning, I had to deliberately make a choice when my flight was delayed. After getting off a 12-hour flight from Israel, and you have a 3-hour stopover, and then you get to the gate and they tell you the flight's delayed by 3 hours, which means you're going to miss your connection to Bozeman. So you get them to change you to a different flight to Salt Lake City, only to find out that flight's delayed by 3 hours, which means you're not going to make a connection through Salt Lake City. You'll have to wait to the next connection, right? And the natural thing you want to do after coming off a plane, the natural thing you want to do, I can't say out loud because I don't want to get in trouble. But the second natural thing that you would want to do is blow your gasket. And I made a deliberate choice. I was messaging with Chavi. She was in the middle of sending ZC off to camp. And I said, you know what? I slept 8 hours on the flight in a coach seat from Israel because I was so tired. I conked out with my head crooked like this for 8 hours, on and off. I'm not that tired. So I have the capacity. There is no excuse for me to lose my cool. There's no excuse for me to lose my mind. There's no excuse for me to raise my voice or be nasty or disrespectful to anyone working for the airline. It's not their fault. They're not in charge of hydraulics. So instead, me and a couple of the other passengers who were all on these delayed flights, we had a blast together. We were cracking jokes. We became friends. We're now friends on LinkedIn. And one of them is Jewish, one of them is not. We had a whole team Chaver Fabrengen. That's a much better way to deal with it. But that takes internal work. It's a work in progress. It doesn't stop. And that's the key here. Pinchas is teaching us what Moses didn't. And that is, we need to remember that we act in the physical realm. And if you're living in the physical realm and you're interacting with the physical realm, and the goal is to sanctify and transform the physical realm, then you got to operate within the physical realm, which means it takes time because you're trying to take something that's physical and reveal the spirituality within it. By definition, that's going to take time. And it's going to take work and hard work until it's internalized and transformed. So in this case, in this specific narrow part of the Torah, to take the Moses route would actually be the easier route. Hashem, please send us spirituality. The Jewish people need forgiveness, and Hashem does it. But who's doing the work? Moshe is praying, and Hashem's doing the work. Pinchas is doing the work. And Hashem is blessing them because of the work instead of because of the prayer, and that makes all the difference. So here is that lesson from Pinchas, that if we want to have continuity for the future of Judaism, it's not by motivational inspiration. It's not by, 1-minute doses of memes on Facebook. And it's not about how many times you write pro-Israel posts, which are good. It's not what Twitter is not going to change the world. You know what will? people working on their own inside. One mitzvah at a time, not one mitzvah a day, one mitzvah at a time, not one mitzvah a day, but transforming our inside. And the only way to know if you're actually doing the work, the hard work, which takes pause, you have to pause and ask yourself, or convince yourself, or meditate. And I've done it a few times in the last few weeks, mostly in airports, and it's an incredible thing to do the work and then see the results. Who would suffer most if I get angry in the airport this morning? Me. People in the airport, they get screamed at all day. It's JFK. It's not I wouldn't be the first, I wouldn't be the last. The one who would get onto the plane being miserable and being upset and being full of unhealthy emotions would be me. Instead, I went on the plane and we got on the plane. You want to know what happened? A couple got upset at the flight attendant. And they got so upset at him that he started rebuking. The flight attendant started saying that he doesn't feel comfortable flying with them. So they took out their phone and started videoing him. So the flight attendant said, if they're on the plane, he's not flying with us. Now, if he doesn't fly with us, we don't have a crew member's missing. We have to wait for a new crew member. This went on for an hour. An hour. I was ready to shut the whole thing down for the flight attendant and for the. But you know what I did instead? I went up to the front. I was at the front. So I said, guys, I'm a rabbi. Let me mediate. They were all laughing. We all had a good sense of humor. They didn't want me to mediate. They had to follow the rules and the protocol. Finally, the flight attendant went off the plane. Said they couldn't find a new flight attendant. So eventually the flight attendant came back on the plane. They took the couple off the plane. And an hour later, we flew to Salt Lake City. By the time we took off, right? I could have been angry and mad because I missed my connection to from Salt Lake and I had to wait for the next plane. What for? Hashem obviously wanted me in Salt Lake for another 2-3 hours to work on the bris and to figure out the bris with with Brooke's new baby boy, and there was things to do. Not only Gamzul Teva, to pause and not Gamzul Teva. You could say when you're angry also. You could say I'm angry, but I know God has a plan. No. The novelty that comes with the work is to pause before you get angry and say, Hashem runs the world, everything's divine providence. And even if right now, internally, I feel like I can't believe the airline's doing this to me. I'm so tired. I want to get to my own bed. I don't want to be stuck in it. Deep breaths and go, hold on, there's a plan here. It's very, very hard. And for me, it's airports, and for you, it might be something else. But that's what Pinchas teaches us. The hard work, the real transformation comes through the hard work in the real world. And if we do that, we merit for ourselves the covenant of peace. Number one, because we end up living a much more peaceful life. And number two, that carries on to our descendants, because now they too know how to live a peaceful life without getting enraged by everything and getting snowflaked by everything and getting like the flight attendant. There's a young pisher said on the plane today, I don't feel comfortable flying with them. Too old. It's an older couple. They had a little moment of grouchiness. There was nothing unsafe about them. There was nothing violent about them. But he didn't feel safe. So for an hour, he had to sit there and wait till we could figure out his safety. And we were all cracking up in the front where we were sitting in the plane about the new age. Doesn't feel safe. The pilot thought it was funny. Everyone thought, but the bottom line is, if we want to pass on to our children and our grandchildren and the future of humanity how to live with peace, we have to role model that for them, and then automatically that will be carried on like it was for Pinchas until we merit the ultimate time of shalom, the ultimate time of peace. When Asati shalom is to give peace upon the land, there'll be peace and no fear. There'll be nothing to fear in the holy land of Israel, the land that I had the incredible blessing of standing by the Western Wall Monday night at midnight, and having you all in mind standing at the holiest place on earth. So we merit not just the wall, but the building of the temple, the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu. May it be speedily nowadays. Amen. I'd like to remind everyone that tomorrow is the 17th of Tammuz. It's a fast day, the beginning of the 3 weeks of mourning. The fast in Bozeman begins at 3:22 a.m. and does not conclude, sadly, does not conclude until 9:54 p.m. It is the latest and longest fast, and obviously it doesn't start like Tisha B'Av the night before, but it's a tough one. So hydrate, stop at the grocery tonight, get as much hydration as you need, get as much food as you need. 3:22 a.m. in Bozeman, 9:54 tomorrow night. And if you're not in Bozeman, make sure to check the times in your respective communities. have an easy fast, and even better. You heard the way I said better, like a New Yorker? Better? Even better is before the fast even starts, we should already be back in Eretz Yisrael. It's going to be a long trip if I end up going back there, so I'm just saying. And it's fine. Oh, wow, where she lives, Erica, in Norway, the fast starts at 1:43 a.m. and finishes at 1:40 a.m. It's a 24-hour fast. See, you got to move to Bozeman, Erica. Anyhow, sei gesund. We'll see you back here. Have an easy fast. A guten Shabbos, and we'll see you soon. Good night.